Hello, welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews.
I don't think we should go up to that Pet Semetary.
And I'm Gary. And today we're going to review and discuss Pet Semetary, which came out in 1989, directed by Mary Lambert and adapted by the book by Stephen King. And Stephen King also did the screenplay for this film.
Nice.
Iain, why don't you give us the synopsis?
The story follows the Creed family who have just moved into a new house in a small town. The dad, Dr. Lewis, played by Dale Midkiff, has just got a new job in the town as the local doctor, but realizes that quite close to his house is a pet cemetery. A lot of bad things happens to the doctor's family, and he is given the information that past the pet cemetery there's an ancient Indian burial ground, that if he buries anything in there, it may come back to life. But he's been warned. The ground is sour, and whatever comes back may not be completely good.
As I said, this was directed by Mary Lambert, and I didn't really recognise her name at all. And so I looked up the body of her directional work.
Okay.
And literally before making this film, she'd worked with Madonna on the Like a Prayer music video.
All right. Okay.
But I didn't really recognise any of her other directorial work until, of course, I noticed that she was the director for Pet Semetary 2.
Yeah, is that any good?
No.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely, categorically not.
Oh.
It is not. It shouldn't even be called Pet Semetary 2. And if you watched that film, you couldn't even tell that it was the same director. It was almost like she had a lobotomy going into that sequel. It's
Ouch.
Absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. I mean, there wasn't a second Stephen King book, Pet Semetary.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have to say, I have read Pet Semetary. I read it many years after seeing the film. Of course, when I first saw Pet Semetary, I wasn't even really sure who Stephen King was.
Yeah.
Of course, I'd experienced lots of different films and then realised that this name kept popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
And then I found the books and started reading the books. And Pet Semetary was one of the books that I can't remember too much about, but there's a few moments and scenes in that book that have stayed with me forever. This film, you know, in memory, was one of those classic horror films.
Yeah, I mean, I read up on notes for this. I'd never read the book, but he'd written Pet Semetary, and just felt it was way too dark.
Oh, it
generally just got kind of darker and darker as it went on. So he didn't want to actually publish it, but because he had to fill in his contract,
a lot of his family members told him that they hated it, and so he kind of shelved it. He was like, nobody likes this.
Yeah,
book.
Nobody likes it, but he took it to finish off the contract, and it became a bestseller, and everybody loved it. I remember sitting down to watch this film early 2000s. I'd avoided it for a long time because I like Stephen King, but I only like certain things of his work. I mean, The Shining, is amazing. The film is just as good.
Well, it's Kubrick.
Yeah, but it's Kubrick. But the way it's shown to you is really, really well done. I love Maximum Overdrive. I like Carrie, and it was just, after a while, I'm just like, you know what, Stephen, I just don't need any more. I've already sat through 3 hours of it. I've already gone through the Tommyknockers. I've done 7 hours of The Stand and the Langoliers and Pet Semetary. I just don't need any more. And
don't forget Christine.
And Christine, yeah,
still
Christine,
one of my favourites.
There's so many.
Yeah,
see,
there's so many.
And so I did avoid it for a while, and then I did sit down and I watched it. And one thing has always stuck with me: those fucking trucks. If there's one lesson I took from this film when I went to have children, it was never fucking take your eyes off them, ever, especially next to a main road.
Well, the film foreshadows it several times.
Yes.
I mean, after the beginning where we get introduced to the fantastic set of the Pet Semetary.
Yeah.
And I love how you hear all the children's voices sort of reading the inscriptions on their pets' tombstones.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you do see those trucks careening down the road several times and at certain angles where it is very ominous.
Yeah. And we see the Creed family move in. You have Lewis, played by Dale Midkiff, who I only really remember from the TV series Time Tracks. That's it. I used to watch Time Tracks, and he acts in that exactly how he acted in this. You've got Denise Crosby playing his wife Rachel. She's been in quite a few films. She was the mother in Deep Impact, and she also played Tasha Yar in Star Trek Next Generation, which, for me, when you watch Tasha Yar die, you're like, oh, fucking God, you know, and it really just kept her in my mind.
It's like one of the first major Star Trek deaths.
Yeah, that was it. And they move in with their son and their daughter, and they're introduced to Judd, played by Fred Gwynne, who you may recognise as the original Herman Munster from the Munsters. Just this massive frame, you know, he comes across oh so nice. And just his accent. His accent in this film is, oh my God, it's just so good, you know. It's just so good. You don't want to go down that path, yo. You know, just don't go down there, no. And it's just,
you know, because I saw the film first, when I read the book afterwards, it was his voice. I could hear his voice reading the lines from the book for me. It was just great.
Yeah.
I live just across the road. You want to watch out for that road. Them damn trucks go back and forth all day and most of the night.
One of the issues I have with this film is time. Now, as the film would progress, the family have moved in. They've come across their new home. They love it. They come across this strange path that leads them, that Judd leads them to the pet cemetery, and they're seeing all these things. And yet the time that you're supposed to believe that the family is in this house is not displayed to you well.
Definitely a few months have passed. You know that they've just moved from sort of...
I think it's Chicago. They moved from
Chicago into Maine.
Family. Yeah.
And you see that the seasons have passed when you see the little girl change the sticker on her window.
Yeah, that was it. That was the only thing that told me. You know, I got nothing from the actors that these things had been going for a couple of months. You know, you saw the friendship between Judd and Lewis build, but at the same time, Judd was keeping Rachel at an arm's length, but allowing Lewis to come into this world and say to him, oh yeah, that will lead to the pet cemetery, and oh, you don't go past there, and it tells him about all the strange things that have happened in this town. Yet, like you said, the only real reflection that you get of, you know, I think they move in the summer, and then by Christmas, a lot of bad shit has fucking happened. But the only real telling you get of that is the little girl changing her sticker on the window.
Well, the time passing, it didn't really bother me or affect me that much.
Yeah, well, maybe because you'd read the book, you knew all the backstory, you knew the things that had been taken out, and so, you know, it was best to avoid that stuff. For me, not have read the book, like I said, the only issue I have is the time scale. It goes so quickly. Like the first day he goes to work. You know, they've been in the house, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month. I don't know. But he goes to work and he's taking the cat with him, and he's been told by Judd that maybe you should get your cat spayed and stop it from wandering into that there road. Sorry, and she's got to keep doing that all the way through this, and so he decides that he's going to take the cat with him to work to get done, and then he's in work, and there's a guy being dragged in, Victor Pascal, who's a jogger, and he's been hit by a truck, and you see this bulging hole in his head and his brain showing, and you're like, oh my God, that's fucking gross.
It's a pretty decent practical effect.
Yeah.
It still looks gross today.
Yeah, and he comes in, he gets put on the bed. And Lewis is obviously trying to save him. And he says something to the nurse, like, let's do this by the book. And she closes the curtain. Now, time must have passed, because the next shot that you see is Lewis just sit down next to Victor.
I think Victor was already dead, and the doctor was just making everybody else get to work. And I think he already just knew. He already had acknowledged that he had passed.
Yeah, I mean, I got that. It's just the way that the film kind of showed it to me was that he was doing everything he could to try and save his life. And as soon as the curtain closed, he just went, nah, I'm done. You know, and he sits down there, and he's sitting there looking at the body, and obviously he's talking to him like, I tried to help you. And the spirit of Victor comes back.
Spits blood in his face.
Yeah, to warn him not to go past the barrier of the pet cemetery.
I'll come to you.
How did you know my name?
So the following day, Judd calls over Lewis and says, hey, I think I found your cat.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
frozen to my yard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a disgusting scene where you see him sort of pulling him and uprooting him. That's what it looks like. And the sound effects
Yeah.
as he puts the cat in the bag. It's just like, yeah, it's pretty bad. But then Judd's just like, we'll take him to the pet cemetery. Because at the moment, Lewis is just like, I don't know how I'm going to approach my daughter and tell her that the cat's dead.
Yeah.
So he's just like, I'll just store it in the shed until I think about it. And I'll just tell her the cat maybe have run away or anything but acknowledge having to face the conversation of death. And so when Judd's just like, no, we'll go now. I'm going to grab my shovels, follow me. They get to the cemetery. And then Judd's just like, no, we're going up here. But, and then he gives him his list of things to do, like, don't look down, just keep moving.
Yeah.
And you see Judd, he's just up there in a second.
He's gone.
Like, damn,
He
old
is
man. How did you get up there so fast? And, of course, Lewis tries to follow him up and steps on a rotted branch and falls all the way down. I was like, well, that could have been a hell of a lot worse.
Yes. Yeah. But my question is this. Judd knows that doing this is no good.
Deep down, he does, yeah.
So why does he make Lewis do it?
Now, this film, it is a bugbear for the film fans that watch this film, because in the book, it becomes very clear that there is a force or an entity, it's a Stephen King demonic otherworldly entity that really does inhabit that burial ground it's beckoning these people to it. It's beckoning the dead to be buried there, and those that are being led there to bury the dead kind of feel great. It kind of empowers them in what they're doing.
Right, okay.
And if you are weak-willed, I guess like Judd is,
right,
you are easily convinced to go and do what it wants to do. There's a couple of scenes later on in the film where Judd kind of tries to explain that it is his fault. Now, in the book, that scene is massively extended, where he explains that there's a force and a pull and something there. Also in the book, there is a Wendigo that is haunting or is in that wood.
Right,
and in the film, you hear it once.
Yeah, and
you
then
hear
you
like
say it's a
weird
loon.
scream. And Judd just says, it's some strange loon.
Judd, what's that?
Just a loon, that's all.
Yeah.
But that was actually the Wendigo in the book, which they just decided not to adapt in the film. So there's other things going on there.
Yeah.
Which the film just, it glazes over, and it does make you think that the character is stupid for doing it.
It is, because there's a couple of points where, Judd really passes over the knowledge of the things that have gone on at this burial ground. Really, really well done. The discussions about what he did with his dog Spot, the local guy who buried his son up there, the background of the burial ground. It's really, really well done. But you have all these warning signs being thrust in your face that Lewis should not go up there. And he and Judd completely ignore them all. In the film, I mean, I'm not going by the book, but in the film, it just seems like they completely ignore them all just so that the story can unfold. He goes up there and they've got the dead cat, and he says, oh, well, you got to bury your own. I'm just going to sit over here and have a cigarette. And I'm sat there and I'm just like, this is wrong. That the cat is going to come back evil. Same as your dog came back evil.
Well, in the books, when the animals come back, they're not violent or aggressive like they are in the film.
Yeah.
They're pretty docile. They're very much like zombies in a way.
Yeah.
Same for the people that come back. They're not immediately aggressive and murderous. They're kind of like the devil. They're the devil that knows all your secrets and will just verbally say your secrets in public to other people and kind of expose you for who you are. It was that kind of evil.
Right.
Whereas in the film, they just come back instantly murderous.
Yeah.
Which for me, I think works for the film.
Yeah, it works for the film, but with a lot of the detail, like we said, in the book missing, you don't garner it. You don't garner that information. If you don't know it, it's just going to be like an empty plot hole. But Lewis buries the cat up there, and then the next day, the cat has returned. You know something is completely wrong when the fact that A, his eyes shine that evil green colour. B, he smells like death, like death. And at the later point in the movie, he eats raw meat. You know, like he is starving hungry. Oh yeah, and he's massively aggressive to Lewis. Warning signs, do not bury anything else in that cemetery, Lewis. Just don't.
Well, it's like Judd says to him, he's like, you know, that cat's not your daughter's anymore. Now that cat is yours. And he mentions later that, you know, whatever you bury up there or whatever is yours will come back to you. So it's kind of like that bond, that connection is then instantly made between the deceased resurrected and whoever buried them in that graveyard.
Yeah. Another point I kind of had an issue with was Mrs. Bainbridge. Mrs. Bainbridge, the housekeeper. She's there helping the family and she's complaining about her stomach pains. And we see this a couple of times where the stomach pains are getting worse. And then she just commits suicide.
It's a pretty brutal sequence. It's shot very well. You'd feel the effect of it, but you're still left wondering what actually pushed her to do that.
Yeah, there was no build up to it, and there's nothing that follows after it. It just seems like it's one of those scenes from a book where you think, oh, that was probably been expanded in the book.
That doesn't happen in the book.
Then why put it in the film?
Well, it's actually Judd's wife who passes away in the book.
Okay.
And so they decided we still need we still need a funeral scene. So we'll just do this and have this effective, scary moment of suicide.
Yeah, it just again, it just seemed to me like a stupid character. She could have spoken to the doctor, but she was so adamant that she wasn't going to, that they were just going to pass. But instead of them passing, the pain just got too much and she decided to commit suicide. Now, we get to the bare bones of the film where, like I said, time displacement has gone to a point where they've been now living in this house for a couple of months. And they are having a family picnic outside. Like I said, a pre-warning to anybody with children is that if you were living next to a main road with lots and lots of trucks screaming past, I'd suggest like a really large fence, you know, or something to keep them occupied, because they are playing with Gage, their 2-year-old little boy, I think he is, and Lewis has got him and he's flying his kite and he's absolutely loving it. The family are loving it. The daughter is getting annoyed because she wants to play with the kite and she swears and everybody gets distracted. Now, as they're distracted, the spool of wire from Gage's hands falls out of his hands and starts getting blown towards the road. Now, as you said, it's supposed to be the influence of the pet cemetery seeking payment, I suppose, for allowing Church, their cat, to be brought back. And in one of the most traumatic scenes that has always fucking stuck with me, Gage follows the spool of wire out into the middle of the road, and the truck driven by the lorry driver isn't able to stop.
You see that tiny shoe just bouncing down the road, you know, your heart is sunk, just watching it, your emotions are just, crumbling.
Yeah.
And then Lewis just delivers one of the best no's in film. Like, you feel that punch, you know, it's
kind of weird because I found that Dale Midkiff had like a stony way of acting.
Yeah.
But it kind of works.
Well, and in the latter half of the film, after this incident, he is pretty much catatonic.
Oh yeah,
he's quite a lot.
He is broken after this.
He sells it very, very well, and yeah, the emotional impact that it has on him is devastating.
Yeah, because they bury the son, and there's that whole fight sequence at the church, which is just as more shocking when Rachel's father, who has a problem with Lewis, just starts attacking him, and Lewis fights back because he's just as upset. He doesn't see it as his fault. It was an accident. I'd say you should have put a big fence in the way, but that's just me. And the coffin is knocked off the side, and you're just like, you're expecting like the zombified child to fall out, and it's absolutely shocking. But I like you said about the evil influence, that kind of would explain to me why we kept seeing the flashbacks to Rachel's sister Zelda.
My sister died in the back bedroom, and that's what she was. A dirty secret. I had to feed her sometimes. I hated it, but I did it. We wanted her to die. We wished for her to be dead.
That for me was one of the most frightening sequences in film for me growing up as a child, discovering this film.
Still is.
Zelda is one of my most memorable moments in the film. It's scary as hell.
Oh my God, she's choking. Zelda's choking. And they'll come home and they'll say, I murdered her by choking. They'll say, you hated her, Rachel, and that was true. And they'll say, you wanted her to be dead, and that was true too.
You know, it was only recently that I discovered it was actually a man who's playing that part.
Really?
And they cast a man because they wanted to help add to the illusion that there's something off with Zelda other than the grotesque illness that she's suffering from. And, you know, the whole backstory of Rachel having to come in and feed her sister, who's in this horrible state, for me was just terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
And it's weird as well, because you constantly hear in the film that the mum and dad have an issue with Lewis. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as Lewis finds out about it, he realizes that her mum and dad are bastards, basically. They kept their disabled daughter shoved in the back room, and they made an 8-year-old look after her while they were out. You know, and it shook me again, because I'm just like, then why do you keep sending your wife and your daughter and your children off to stay with these people, knowing that they're not as perfect as they seem to be? And obviously now I know, of, like you said, with the evil presence of the cemetery, you know, it's picking at Rachel's mind. She has this fear of death, so we're going to play with that. We're going to bring back the nightmares of her sister Zelda. But Judd, well, he tries to explain to Lewis that it's not a good idea to dig up your son and take him up to the Micmac burial ground, you know, because not very good things happen up there. And I'm just like, Judd, you already made him bury his fucking cat.
But a part of Judd really also does want it to happen, because he's feeding off the energy that the entity up there is providing as well.
But you don't get that from the film.
No, you don't. Right. So it does make him look like a complete asshole.
Yeah, because he knows Lewis is going to do it, because Lewis is broken. But at the same time, he's trying to stop him from doing it. And you keep seeing Victor Pascal's ghost coming back to Lewis, saying to him, don't go up there. Just don't. And so I'm like, Lewis, I know it's the point of the movie, you know, don't get me wrong. It's just with all these warning signs put in, and the to the lesser extent, the evil entity not being in there, you just think that they're just being idiots. If the evil entity had been there influencing them more and more, you'd realize the reason why they're ignoring a lot of the warning signs, because this thing has power over them. But Lewis digs up Gage's body and takes him up to the burial ground. And I really liked that sequence. When you see Judd and Lewis walking during the daytime, it looks ominous, but at the same time really bright. The sun's out, everything looks nice. When he's walking through it in the dark, you know, and you see that blue light appear at the pet cemetery as he climbs over the border. You know, and there's that face screaming. What's with that face screaming?
I have no idea. It was just all kinds of strange.
Yeah, I was just like, is that Judd's face telling him no? Is that Victor's face telling him no? It's just his face comes and shoots at him, and he carries on carries on up there. He gets up to the burial ground and he buries Gage's body. Now, we know that Gage is not going to come back as innocent.
A part of you still watching the film, though, you feel so sorry for this family that, you know, part of you can't help but wish that it will be okay, that it might work.
Yeah.
But you know.
Yeah, but I'm just gonna point this out as a parent and a husband, that if, knocking on wood, hopefully nothing ever bad happens to my family, but if anything ever did and somebody said, well, there's a local ancient Indian burial ground over there that you can bury them in, I'd be like, no, hell no, a big old hell no, because you just, as much as you want it to be good, you've seen far too much evidence to know that it's not going to be. Judd's explanation about the local guy's, son coming back as a zombie, the dog, the cat, just the presence and the visuals of the burial ground. It's not a good thing. I don't think any animals live up there. I don't think I heard any birds tweeting. Yeah, it's just an area of death. And so when Gage comes back, that for me is when the horror aspect of the film really hits 11.
Yeah. The film done a good job of building everything up so that when the horror moments like this really come to the main front of the film, you're kind of ready for it. You kind of believed in enough of this world building that the events are happening, although a little bit far-fetched, is real.
It's real,
and that plays into the horror. And my God, is Baby Gage, the killer, one of the most frightening villains in a horror movie. Nico Hughes, I recognised him from Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Yes.
He's a fantastic child actor. He's very expressive in his face. But that laugh...
God, yeah.
Every time you hear it, it sounds incorporeal. It sounds like it's otherworldly, but at the same time, you can believe it.
Yeah.
And it's the way that he just says he wants to play with you.
I like Jazz, Daddy. Will you come over and play with me? First I played with Dad, then Mommy came, and I played with Mommy. We played, Daddy. We had an awful good time. Now I want to play with you.
What did you do?
It's the way he says it. It's horrible. It's amazing.
God.
It's such a mind fuck.
You know what? What was really weird is that it's scarier than Chucky.
For sure, yeah.
Because you're not messing with a doll. You are, that's a small child there. It's still dressed in his funeral garb. Come back with this evil presence in him. He seems as well, when you see Gage, the little boy before the accident, he is a little boy. He's only learning how to speak.
Yeah, he doesn't even have a single full sentence.
That's it. When he is evil, though, he is a lot smarter. And that is really fucking scary. When you see those little hands pick up the box and pull out the silver scalpel, you're like, that's not good. When he goes into Judd's house and he's like, Judd, come play with me. And Judd pulls out his little knife and he's like, Gage, where are you? I've got something for you. You're just like, what the fuck's going to happen? And it's always stuck with me, that Achilles heel.
Oh, yes.
Every time.
Yes.
I know a lot of people go, well, they did it in the Hostel. Hostel's shit, really. When Judd gets hit, you fucking feel it, and he hits the floor, and then that swipe
across the face,
across the mouth, and you just see Judd's mouth kind of extend a little bit. You're like, what the fuck? And then the attack. I mean, do they? I don't know if they explain it in the book. Do they need to eat human flesh, or did he just do that because he wanted to?
He just did that because he kind of wanted to. I mean, I think it was just his way of killing him off.
Yeah.
And a lot of people got a bit upset with the fact that they had this child actor doing these horrific moments in the film, and apparently they shot them separately.
Really?
And then imposed them on top.
Yeah.
There was also a lot of use of a doll, essentially.
We see that
puppet.
We see that later on.
Yeah, and so the child actor was really not aware of all of the horrific things that he was actually inflicting in the film.
But while all this is happening as well, Rachel has gone away to see her parents, and she has heard information from her daughter concerning that what her husband may be doing with the body, because her daughter is getting all the dreams from Victor. And so she's kind of convinced, partly through Victor's ghost, but also trying to ring home that something is wrong, and gets on a plane and decides to fly back. And then you have that god-awful fucking sequence in the bedroom where she sees Zelda again. And I'm just like, I don't like it.
Get you for letting us die.
Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. We've had a strong tailwind, and we expect to arrive at Boston's Logan Airport almost on time.
I don't like it. But Victor is there, and I really got confused about what his influence was to Rachel. He's trying to get her back to Lewis, to stop Lewis, but knowing full well that it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because she gets in a truck. That was the thing as well. She jumped in a truck and hitchhiked to her house. I don't understand physical or mental trauma, but when that truck pulls up outside her house, the same type of truck that killed her son in the same fucking area where her son died, and she's like, thanks for the lift.
I think that truck also had 666 on the side of it.
Right, okay.
It's just like...
The signs are just not there. And she says thank you to the driver, and Victor's ghost appears, and he says, well, you know, good luck with finding Lewis. I can't go on any further. And she says something like, I hope it all ends well. And and Victor goes, I don't think so.
I'm sure things will be fine.
I'm not.
And that's it.
Like, if you know it's not going to end well, why did you bring her back?
Why did you bring her
Are
all the
you
way?
under the guise of the cemetery?
Yeah. I mean, is that the point of your warnings to go to Lewis? Don't do it. Don't do it. Oh, he's done it. I knew he would. It's like reverse psychology, you know.
Yeah.
But Rachel gets lured into Judd's house
By the voice of Gage and her sister Zelda.
Yeah, and she goes in there and makes her way up the stairs into the same room that she saw from her dream. Sees her sister there. Is slightly terrified by it, knowing full well that her sister can't be alive. And then Gage takes the place of her sister. I did not like what Gage was wearing.
Well, it's a reminder of... Because we saw pictures of Zelda with the grey cat in...
Yeah, I didn't like that fucking picture. I did not like that picture
and so
either.
now here is Gage, almost dressed like that picture.
Yeah, I did not like that picture or what he
No.
was wearing. And just the way Gage is coming across to his mum. Mum, I want to play with you. I've got something for you. Brandishing a brand new fucking scalpel.
That is something, Mommy.
Oh, Gage. Gage.
I brought you something, Mommy.
And it cuts away. But it cuts away really well because we hear the scream. And I'm assuming flesh ripping from the scalpel. And then that's it. Until the next morning. Because Lewis has come home and he's gone to sleep and missed all these great events.
Man, when he wakes up and bangs his head on that table,
yeah.
I was
man.
just like, damn, that looks really painful. But it's the fact that he's holding his leg, his chest, his arm, and I'm like, not once does he go to his head. I'm like, man, I would be crawling on the floor right now.
That was brilliant timing from Dale Midkiff when he just rolled and just whack off his head. But he gets a phone call from Rachel's dad saying that she's come home during the night to find out how he is, and Lewis's daughter has had the dream that her mum is dead.
Yeah, I think there was a great moment here. That there's no dialogue, but you look, the camera sort of does a slow pan across the counter, and you can see that Lewis has prepared all of Gage's toys, ready for him to come back. But he's also realised that there's the muddy footprints and his scalpel's missing.
Yeah,
and so he kind of realises that's the moment where he knows that it's not worked.
It's not worked, and he's got to kill his son. He heads over to Judd's house, and the interior of Judd's house has gone all weird. I mean, is that to symbolise that the ground is sour, so the house is sour?
In a way, it's also Gage and the cemetery just fucking with him.
Yeah, because it disappears 2 seconds later. But Lewis has seen Rachel's shoe now and realises that Rachel is here. He can hear Gabe's voice because Gabe has rang the house and said, "Dad, come, I played with Judd, I played with Mummy, now I want to play with you." And you're just like, fuck's sake, kid. And he heads up the stairs, comes across Judd's body, which great gore effect.
Yeah, I mean, it was a puppet essentially.
Yeah, but still looked really well. The detail on the mouth and the blood. He's in absolute shock. He's already taken out Church at the beginning, at the entrance of the house. Now I wasn't too sure if that was a real cat or not, because I was waiting for the cut to go, oh, it's a puppet cat, but it just didn't seem to come, and he just kind of held it up by the scruff of its neck and jammed it in the ass with a needle, and then the cat just falls asleep. And
it's good acting from the cat.
Yeah, brilliant acting from the cat. He gets upstairs, comes across Judd's body, and this is the first time he sees Gage really as well, and Gage is just feral.
He just launches at him at first.
He
and
does.
He's just like, my God. And you have the whole argument of how is a full-grown man, same as Judd, how is a full-grown man really having difficulties with this toddler?
Well, it's demonic possessed child.
It is.
It's a demonic possessed child. Yeah. That's what I went with.
But they're also grief-stricken and emotionally overwrought with everything that's happening.
They're trying to fight an undead 2-year-old who was so innocent in life. It's really difficult to.
But it builds to that moment where he's got the needle again, and he injects Gage in the side of the neck, and Gage just starts crying like a toddler's tears.
God, it was so...
And it's just like, oh my God, it's fucking horrific.
Yeah. It's the way that he's just like not fair, and you see the actor Miko Hughes walking down that corridor and just stumbling and then collapsing, and you really fucking buy it. I really bought it that is an undead 2-year-old who's come back and now has to die again. You really got it. Lewis has also come across Rachel's body as well, and in all of his great knowledge, burns down the house containing Judd's body, Church's body, and his own son's body, and then decides, I'm going to bury my wife up in the Micmac burial ground because she's only been dead for a couple of hours.
Even Victor turns up one last time, but he may as well just have a sign which says Micmac burial grounds this way, because it's over. It's over.
Yeah,
Lewis is gone. He has been consumed by his grief and by the events of everything that's happened. But part of you is still like, well, just maybe. Like, he is right. She's only just maybe.
No.
And so when you realise he is completely possessed, overcome with the cemetery's pull.
I think there were a couple of loose ends though at the end of the film, because after he's buried the body, he returns home, and Rachel comes back, and she's all zombified, and her eyes missing, leaking fluid. It's really gross. And the last shot you see is her pick up a knife, and you hear Lewis's scream, and the film ends. But for me, I'm just like, well, what happened to Rachel? Did she return? Did she take Lewis up there and bury him and let him come back, and the two of them are now living their life as an undead family? Did she burn down her own house to destroy herself? Is she wandering the woods? What happened to the daughter? Did she go into care? Is she still having dreams? It's just... I don't know what they did with it in the book.
I actually can't quite remember how it ends. I think it ends very similar.
Yeah.
But I'd imagine that the daughter just ended up staying with the the grandparents in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I have no idea why.
Just like I said, it's just a couple of loose ends where I was like, you were going really well, and now kind of.
I mean, what happens next is really another story in itself. I mean, the whole setup and build up and payoff is right there, and it ends like a good horror movie kind of should. When it's over.
Yeah, it does, as long as you're not looking too far into it.
I have several memorable sequences in the film. You know, Judd's line sometimes dead is better.
No, Gary. It's sometimes dead is better.
Sometimes dead is better.
When Judd also says each buries his own.
Each buries his own.
I'd help you, but you got to do it yourself. Each buries his own.
Yeah. They're just memorable quotes. One of my favourite scenes is when Lewis is in the bathtub. And he's just that one moment of relaxation, and then the dead rat thrown at his chest by Church.
That was brilliant.
That's a brilliant moment. It just cements to you how twisted this cat is.
Yeah,
you know, it's just haunting Lewis throughout the film. All the scenes with Zelda, you know, just always. Anyone ever mentions Pet Semetary, I just get the flash of that Zelda creature just running at the camera.
Yeah,
it's just like no, that's horrific and scared me and scarred me for quite some time.
Never get out of bed again. Never get out of bed again. Never get out of bed again.
Gage's death.
Oh,
you know, it's very well photographed.
Yeah.
The cinematography is great. The foreshadowing is there when it actually happens, and Lewis's cry afterwards. You know, it's just it sticks with you. It really sticks with you. The film, you know, it makes you laugh, and then it really makes you cry. You know, and you're left suspended in this horrific atmosphere, which is only going to get worse from that point on. And Gage, when he's back from the dead, and all of his lines, his dialogue, his laughter, and the way that he says, "I want to play with you," just freaky as hell.
Scared you, didn't I?
Gage?
Hi, Daddy. Now I want to play with you.
All of Judd's scenes are brilliant. Fred Gwynne just does such an amazing job as Judd. He's really helpful. He's that nice neighbor. He's trying to, just help out as much as he can. And yeah, he does do the wrong things by showing Lewis the burial ground and going through all that kind of stuff. But it's nice to have him there. You know, his accent as well, Fred Gwynne's accent as itself, I'm not mocking it. I'm trying to replicate it because it's just done so brilliantly.
Do you know what a graveyard really is? It's a place where the dead speak. No, not right out loud. Their stones speak, or their markers. This ain't a scary place, Ellie. It's a place of rest and speaking.
The Zelda sequences, what the fuck? You know, it was enough with what was already going on in the movie. Those things just kind of push it slightly over the edge for me with just, I'm coming to get you, Rachel. I'm going to get you. You're just like, shoot it in the fucking face. Gage, his sequences, like I said, if you're a parent, if you have a young son, it will really fucking hit you. All of the nice little moments that you have leading up to the horrific crash. The crash itself is just heartbreaking. And then on top of that, when Gage comes back, just really, Miko Hughes was just brilliant. He just seeing him stand there with a scalpel. I mean, would it be wrong of me as a parent to dress my son up as in that for Halloween?
Damn.
Would it?
Scary
as hell. It would be scary as well. I don't even think I could stand it.
The cane and the top hat.
The top hat, holding like a little toy scalpel, and every time somebody opens the door, he just goes, I want to play with you. Just watch him slam it like, fuck off! I do recommend Pet Semetary. It's got some moments in it that you might just go, duh, that was stupid. But still, it's scary. You know, still, it's got some really great scenes. There's some points that you might question and go, well, what was that all about? That should force you to go and read the books. You know, Stephen King's books are just world renowned. His films, not so much, but if they at least open up your mind to go and read the books, you should totally get it. Some of the scenes in this film are absolutely memorable. Like I said, Fred Gwynne, Gage's scenes. Dale Midkiff, he's all right as an actor, you know, but he just pretty much plays the same part that he played in Time Tracks. But it's just really, really done well. And then by the end of it, you'll have a shiver on your spine and just won't want to go there anymore.
Definitely, yeah. Now, when I read the book, I kind of had to take like the rest of the day off because I was so depressed and so empty by the end of it.
Yeah.
And that is the power of that book, is that it is so depressing, and it does put you in the mindset of a grieving parent mourning the loss of their child. And that really is like the bulk of the horror that I remember from the book. There's a couple of chapters in the book which in the film is just glazed right over, and for me it was the most poignant and most memorable scene in the book.
Oh, really?
Is when he goes to the graveyard, and you know it's all monologue for the character.
Yeah.
And in the film sequence, he literally has like 3 or 4 lines while he's at the cemetery of his son.
Yeah.
And he kind of just talks out loud. And in the book, obviously, pages and pages and pages of his psychology and what he's thinking. How's the rest of the world going to look at him and go, how's your son back from the dead? You know, imagine it all goes right.
Yeah.
You know, he's going through all of the all of these sort of things that could and couldn't happen. Like, how is he going to explain this to his wife?
Yeah.
How is he going to explain it to his daughter that your son, you know, your brother's back alive? But he's also contemplating like the state of decay and the rotting that his son is in, and like how is he going to patch him up? And, you know, especially after the impact of the truck.
Yes.
You know, so there's all of these things that the book goes into, which in the film, the graveyard scene, he's there for 3 seconds, and then before you know it, he's up at the graveyard site, and it's just like, you know, so all of that psychology is not there. And so you as an audience watching this film need to put yourself in the shoes of these characters to really feel the horror, whereas the book does it seamlessly.
I mean, I really love that bit, you know, in the cemetery where he's just sat there holding Gage.
Yes, yeah. It's just a small moment.
Yeah, I mean, he's not saying anything, but you can get a lot from that scene where you're just like, yeah, this guy's broken. He's being pushed to the limit. He wants to try something.
Sure. I also can't remember if there was a friction between the two creeds, but whether they were... I think they were not happily married, if I remember from the book. I think there was some awkwardness there. There was also a couple of awkward sexual encounters between the two of them, which, you know, none of that is actually in the book. They just kind of seem like they're in an okay relationship.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a good relationship going on, but then you have that part at the beginning where the mum puts the dad down.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't want him saying something to, I think it's Ellie, the daughter.
Yeah.
That's it. Ellie makes him promise that nothing bad will happen to church, and he can't make that promise, but his wife forces him to. And then obviously the extra stuff involving her family and how they don't like him. It's not really enveloped in the movie, but you get this feeling that there's a slight friction there.
Yeah, but other than that, I would highly recommend Pet Sematary for its atmosphere, for its pacing. You know, I didn't really feel like the pace dropped. I think it just really built up everything around the events that were going to happen, so that they were obviously foreshadowed.
Yes.
But the execution of it is also very creepy and very effective, and it does leave you with sort of chills afterwards as well.
Yeah.
I think the acting all around is fairly good. I think the actress playing Ellie is probably the weakest link in the whole film. She has some sequences where I'm like, you know, she's okay, and then in others where I'm just like, ugh, she's annoying.
Yeah, that's it. That's like I said, with her dream sequences, it was like she's supposed to be this pinnacle point, but they're not chasing her up.
Yeah.
You know, she's the one warning everybody that this Victor Pascal keeps coming in my dreams telling me these evil things are happening, yet none of you are listening, and it's just the ravings of a small child. I'm like, no, fucking find out this information.
So yeah, you know, of all of the Stephen King book to film adaptations, this is one I do highly recommend. I grew up watching this film. It made me want to go and read the book, which, you know, terrified me even more. And then going back and watching the film and having all of that extra knowledge sort of around the sphere of the film, it just elevates it even more. And it is such a shame that it has a terrible follow-up. You can't believe it's from the same director. And of course it had Clancy Brown plays the sheriff who ends up getting killed and coming back from the cemetery. And it also has Edward Furlong.
Yeah, John Connor's in it as well.
Yeah, who's having mummy issues after she dies, like early on in the film. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely insulting. And it annoys me what they drive past on bikes, I think, past the Creed house, which is still there. And one of the characters explains that the Creeds died and nobody knows what happened to them, but they're all dead. So it's just like, so what?
You know we're going to get asked to do it now. Right?
Just don't. It's a painful, horrible experience, and you don't really need a full review to explain why. You just know. Yeah.
Sometimes that is better.
Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.
I don't want to be buried in a big cemetery. I don't want to live my life again. I don't want to be buried in a big cemetery.
Alright, just Daddy. Will you come over and play with me? First I played with Dad, then Mommy came and I played with Mommy. We played, Daddy. We had an awful good time. Now I want to play with you.